entrepreneur Linda Henning had a life that most would envy.
I sold my clothing line in Europe, Australia, Canada.
She was tall, attractive, always dressed nice, expensive clothes, perfect hair, perfect makeup, nails, the whole thing.
But that would suddenly change when she met a 34-year-old man named Diazin Hassenkoft.
He would promise people that he had a magic elixir that would bring eternal youth to women.
And seemingly overnight, 45-year-old Linda Henning's picture-perfect life changed.
She changed so dramatically, so quickly.
And when her new boyfriend's estranged wife went missing, police would discover just how dramatic the change in Linda's life had become.
Girlie Chu was an alien queen, and I must defeat her.
On the door of Linda Henning. They were looking for Linda's boyfriend, Diazin Hassenkoft.
Friday night, 2 patrol officers come by, and they said they want to look for Diazin, to talk to Diazin.
Earlier that day, Diazin's estranged wife, Girlie Chu, had been reported missing by worried coworkers.
I mean, she's just one of those employees who's the model employee, the employee every boss wants.
The Albuquerque Police Department learned that Girlie Chu Hassenkoff had disappeared when she failed to show up for work, and her employer called and notified the department.
When police searched Girlie's apartment, it was clear that something was wrong.
The first thing I noticed were 3 distinct bleached out stains in her carpet in the den in front of her couch.
It was obvious that there was a damp spot on the carpeting, as if someone had tried to clean up something.
There were also minute drops of blood on the carpet and sofa.
There were found these 7 spots of blood.
Police called in a forensics team to take samples for DNA testing. The samples were turned over to forensics, and police turned their eyes toward Girlie's estranged husband.
Hassenkoff becomes a suspect early on simply because of what Girlie said. If anything happens to me, it's Diazin who does it.
But Diazin was also missing.
There's no sign of him. Nobody knows where he's gone.
That evening, police showed up at the home of Diazin's girlfriend, Linda Henning. And Linda's answers to the detectives' questions only deepened the mystery of Girlie's disappearance.
What drew Linda to Mr. Hassenkoff was their joint beliefs about aliens.
Linda Henning believes in a lot of things that I guess you could say normal people don't.
The owner of the gym said, you might want to meet this fella. He's got a lot of interesting ideas. And then he gave me Diazin's card.
Those interesting ideas were one of Linda's favorite subjects.
Since I was probably 19 years old, I've done a lot of research on and off about government conspiracies, about things the government's involved in and that the public doesn't know.
She was interested in the aliens and the UFOs.
It seems to be sort of a slowly evolving interest, starting with simple things like watching the X-Files, wanting to discuss them at length with different people.
Linda made the first move.
She showed up at his front doorstep and said, "Hi, this is me, and I've heard you believe in XYZ, and can we talk?"
I've kind of pieced together my viewpoint on where the government's headed. And Diazin Hassenkoff had already done a lot of investigation. So we kind of, like the meeting of the minds, He had a tremendous amount of information. I had a tremendous amount of information as well.
The couple hit it off immediately.
It was just an incredible rapport. We talked for probably about, 3 hours.
He had a lot to say about that, and so she was more kind of like interested, I think, at first in the information.
Within a week of their meeting, Linda's relationship with Diazin had become more than professional.
Once we met, we were like together. We were like any spare time, we were together.
Linda wasn't concerned that Diazin was still technically a married man.
Hassenkoff was married to a lovely young woman named Girlie Chu Hassenkoff. She was a girl from Malaysia.
I've never cared about the relationships that any man that was involved with me had. I don't care about her because she's not involved with us.
Diazin had not told Linda much about his soon-to-be ex-wife.
He never discussed it. That would be like airing your personal laundry, and he just didn't do that.
He had told Linda that Girlie worked as a teller in a local bank, Diazin's own work was less traditional.
He came to tell her that he was a doctor and helped with youth serum, anti-cancer shots, and Botox.
He was going to develop a company that was going to have some medical breakthroughs.
But the company never seemed to get off the ground.
Some mysterious obstacle would occur, and everything's going to be delayed. And maybe every 6, 7, 8 months that would occur.
And according to Diazin, Gurley had decided to look for greener pastures. In January of 1999, after 6 years of marriage, she moved out and filed for divorce.
She went her merry way, and they were separated for a year before I ever met him. So I'm not a homewrecker.
By 8 a.m. on the morning of September 10, 1999, Gurley Chu Hasenkoff's supervisor at the bank was already worried about her employee.
Around 8 o'clock, she already has employees coming up to her before she even gets to her desk saying, Gurley hasn't shown up.
It wasn't like Gurley to be even a minute late.
She's the first to work. She's the most reliable.
Gurley's supervisor became even more worried when one of Gurley's close friends called the bank looking for her.
She says, we always talk every night. I always want to make sure that she's okay. And we talk before we go to bed. She never picked up the phone last night.
Gurley's boss decided to call 911.
Her boss is calling the police, trying to impress upon them that this is very serious, that she has met harm's way.
One of Gurley's coworkers went to Gurley's apartment to check on her.
He goes out to the place. There's no sign of Gurley Chu Hasenkoff.
While waiting for officers to arrive, Gurley's worried coworker convinced the apartment manager to check inside Gurley's apartment.
The door was locked, but the deadbolt wasn't locked. Automatically, people who knew Gurley, they realized she would have had that deadbolt latched. It had been left unlatched. Something wasn't right here.
A quick tour of the apartment didn't reveal much, except that Gurley was not there.
Nothing really seems out of order aside from a pillow slightly askew.
However, when police officers arrived, they immediately noticed something disturbing.
The first thing the police notice is a distinct odor of bleach. It was obvious that there was a damp spot on the carpeting, as if someone had tried to clean up something.
The officers called for backup.
I was the on-call primary homicide detective for that time period and was brought in to assist the initial responding officers.
Detective Fox got a search warrant for the apartment and put the crime scene investigators to work.
Rather than cut out those spots in the carpet that had been bleached, the whole carpet area was lifted and taken to the crime lab, the Albuquerque Police Department's crime lab.
Gurley's coworkers also gave detectives a suspect in Gurley's disappearance, her estranged husband, Diazin. If what they told police was true, Diazin had good reason to keep the details of his divorce from Linda Henning.
There were at least 2 reported episodes of domestic violence to the Albuquerque Police Department involving Gurley Chu Hasenkoff and Diazin Hasenkoff.
According to her coworkers, Gurley had been a victim of domestic abuse. She had finally reached a breaking point.
She actually moved to a location not known to Diazin because she feared for her life.
She's filing for divorce. And that action right there, compounded by the fact that she actually had the audacity to say, I deserve some of our stuff. This seems to be a moment that really triggers Hasenkoff's rage. He vows that she won't see a single dime.
And Diazin demonstrated just how seriously he took that vow.
Hasenkoff is calling her work. Hasenkoff is telling her on the telephone that you'll die and your body will never be found.
Diazin Hasenkoff was our initial suspect. He had a violent marital relationship with Gurley.
That afternoon, detectives tried to locate Diazin for questioning. They discovered that he had recently moved. Very recently.
We found that Diazin had hired a moving company and left the state.
Detective Fox put out a national attempt to locate call for Gurley and Diazin.
I put in the locate that she may have been physically injured and is possibly bleeding.
Detectives began checking into Diazin's background. The more they found out, the more convinced they became that he was behind Gurley's disappearance.
In checking his background, you find that Diazin Hassenkopf wasn't his real name. It was Armand Chavez.
His name wasn't the only thing he had fabricated.
Hassenkopf was not a doctor. Hassenkopf was absolutely 100% a fraud.
And his so-called youth serum?
He would promise people that he had a magic elixir that would bring eternal youth to women. And there were women that would pay several $100s for this injection.
Diazin Hassenkopf was exploiting a number of people for financial gain.
During their check into Diazin's background, detectives learned he was involved with Linda Henning. And as it turned out, Linda and Gurley weren't the only women in Diazin's life.
He was simultaneously engaged to a number of women, many of whom never met him, only knew him on the internet.
Apparently, in January of 1999, Gurley had discovered the truth about Diazin's extramarital activities.
Her world is actually crumbling before her over time. At first, it's very slow to come down, but then it comes down real fast. Ultimately, after these domestic violence episodes, Gurley realizes that she has to separate herself from her abuser.
Gurley had moved out and filed for divorce. When detectives talked to neighbors, they discovered that Diazin had spent most of the week before Gurley's disappearance with his new girlfriend, Linda Henning.
Linda Henning's name came up early on in the investigation as being a friend of Diazin Hassenkopf's and a romantic interest.
Which was why Linda found detectives at her door the same evening that Gurley had been reported missing.
They want to look for Diazin, so I did take them through the house. I brought them in.
Coming up, police discover that Linda's boyfriend has a secret life.
He believed that he himself was an alien.
But does Linda also have a secret?
A passerby located a wallet with Gurley Chu Hassenkopf's identification card close to Linda Henning's residence.
On the evening of Friday, September 10, 1999, 45-year-old businesswoman Linda Henning sat down with police officers in her Albuquerque, New Mexico townhouse. Her 34-year-old boyfriend, Diazin Hassenkopf, and his estranged wife, police were starting to fear the worst.
They believed that she was kidnapped and murdered.
All of the evidence pointed toward a violent end. First, there were the 3 suspicious bleach stains in her apartment.
These 3 stains had the smell of bleach, and they looked like they had been a blood-stained area that had been cleaned up by bleach.
Also alarming were items found near a desert highway. Just hours after Gurley had been reported missing, a highway worker had discovered a blood-covered tarp beside the road, about 100 miles southwest of Albuquerque. At first, he wasn't all that concerned.
Well, it is hunting season. Could be that a hunter had been using it.
Then he noticed a blood-stained blouse nearby. A thorough search of the area resulted in more gruesome discoveries.
There are panties. They're blood-stained. There's duct tape. It doesn't look good.
Did the bloody clothes belong to their missing woman?
They match it to Gurley Hassenkopf by looking and determining that it was her clothing.
But even if the clothes belonged to Gurley Hassenkopf, that didn't mean the blood was hers. Only forensic tests could determine who the blood belonged to. That would take time the police were beginning to fear that Gurley didn't have. Interviews with Gurley's friends and co-workers revealed that the Hassenkopf's marriage had not ended as easily as Diazin had led his girlfriend Linda Henning to believe.
Gurley told her boss at the bank, "If I don't ever show up for work one morning, call the police right away."
And her boss had done just that. Now Gurley was missing, and police were trying to track down her estranged husband. It didn't look good that Diazin had apparently skipped town the same day that Gurley had disappeared.
In the initial part of the investigation, we found that Diazin had hired a moving company and left the state.
All the furniture was gone. Everything was gone.
That evening, just hours after Gurley was reported missing, police turned to Diazin's girlfriend, Linda Henning, in their attempt to locate him.
Friday night, 2 patrol officers come by, and I allowed them to come in. I didn't say, "Do you have search warrants?" I cooperated with the police 100%.
The officers left Linda's house with no clues to Diazin's whereabouts. 2 days later, on September 12th, Diazin Hassenkopf was still unaccounted for. That afternoon, police showed up again at Linda's home. This time, new evidence had led them almost to her doorstep. Gurley Chu Hasenkopf's wallet.
A passerby located a wallet with Gurley Chu Hasenkopf's identification card within it, which was within about a half-mile radius of Linda Henning's residence.
Did the wallet mean Linda had been involved in Gurley's disappearance? It certainly had made her a person of interest to police. But when they questioned Linda, she told detectives she had no reason to harm her boyfriend's ex-wife.
I didn't have any negative feelings about Gurley. I didn't know anything.
Detective Mike Fox asked Linda to come down to the station to give a full statement.
They wanted to debrief me, and I agreed to it.
When Linda sat down with detectives in the Albuquerque police interrogation room, they began by asking what she knew about Diazin.
He went to the University of Tokyo and, just gave me some information. He was a medical doctor.
What's his expertise in the field? What did he tell you his field of medicine was?
He said that his field of medicine, he had been a surgeon at one time, cardiothoracic surgeon.
Linda told the detectives that Diazin's moving the same day as Gurley went missing was just a coincidence. She said she had known that Diazin planned to move out of state from the start of their relationship.
At what point did he tell you he was moving or leaving the state?
He had told me that the 1st of August. He said that he was going to leave. And he said that it was even funny that I had even stopped by and seen him because he should have been out by mid-July.
He had already made plans to go to South Carolina. And he had a house that was being built.
However, Linda also claimed she had no idea where Diazin was at the moment.
He just said that he was going to Dallas. And I told this to the police officer on Friday, and the police officer corrects me, and I said, no, I don't think so. And he told me Dallas. Went to Dallas, and then he said that he was going to go to Colorado.
When asked about Diazin's relationship with his ex-wife, Linda said Diazin had not told her much, nor had she asked.
He told me, this is exactly what he told me. He said, they lived separate lives. He said they lived as man and wife for about 30 days, and she moved out of his bedroom, and they lived separate lives.
I really didn't care about an ex-wife, an ex-girlfriend, or anything. I mean, if they're meant to be together, they'll be together.
The detectives then tried to hone in on the exact nature of Linda's relationship with Diazin.
What was your relationship with him?
Just like caretaker.
Kind of a caretaker, just somebody kind of looking out after her.
Yeah.
And it was this insistence that her relationship with Diazin was platonic that ultimately would bring the investigation into Gurley Hasenkopf's disappearance back to Linda.
In following up Linda's statements, we were able to find out that she was lying to us and that she did have a romantic relationship with Diazin. At that point, she moved from being a person of interest to a suspect.
Talking to Linda's friends and acquaintances revealed the unusual nature of Linda and Diazin's bond.
Linda told people, and Diazin Hasenkopf told people, was when they had sexual relations, they would actually become cats.
Friends said that Diazin had told Linda that he had a secret life. However, it was not his history as a con artist that he had divulged.
He believed that he himself was an alien. At least that's what he wanted you to believe. He told some people he was from the Giga Planet and he was 10 or 50,000 years old. Henning, I think, believed him.
She also believed that he was able to morph into different reptiles. I remember her believing that government officials, the president and world leaders were also aliens from another planet.
Linda's friends told detectives that within weeks of meeting Diazin, she had also undergone a transformation.
Linda Henning had a propensity to believe, or certainly fascinated and intrigued by the unexplained phenomena, Black Hawk helicopters, cattle mutilations, UFOs, aliens. It seems that once Hasenkopf is introduced to her life, that these propensities are accelerated to becoming firm beliefs.
Coming up, the search for Gurley heats up.
They brought in psychics, they brought in dogs, they brought in machines that tell where, bones and stuff are.
and authorities come up with a shocking theory about Gurley's last moments.
Linda apparently was an alien queen that had been sent here to save the world.
September 16, 1999, 36-year-old Albuquerque bank teller Gurley Chu Hasenkopf had been missing for 6 days.
We had done a painstaking research into anything that would show that Gurley was still alive. Use of an ATM card, bus terminal, airplane, train, anything like that to leave Albuquerque.
Every avenue led to a dead end. Police concentrated their efforts on finding their lead suspect, Gurley's estranged husband, 34-year-old con man Diazon Hasenkopf, a DNA sample. With 2 missing persons, police were taking nothing for granted.
I immediately offered what they call body collections. I have no problem with that.
Within a week, one of the missing persons was found. Detectives tracked Diazon Hasenkopf to Charleston, South Carolina.
Diazon was located in South Carolina through moving records.
He was with another woman who had believed that they were going to be married.
He denied any knowledge of Gurley's whereabouts. The New Mexico authorities had no body and were still awaiting the results of forensic tests on the crime scene. Without more, they couldn't hold Diazon. Then, he gave them the break they needed. He made a phone call to one of his former neighbors back in Albuquerque.
He calls this neighbor across the street, and she perceives him to be threatening for having spoken with police. The FBI moves in. Hasenkopf is arrested for making threats across state lines.
On the morning of September 22nd, while Diazon was being transported back to New Mexico, Linda Henning was being escorted to the witness box in an Albuquerque courtroom. She had been subpoenaed to testify before a special grand jury convened to investigate Gurley's disappearance.
I was there for 12 hours.
She was there basically as a witness to the case.
Linda told the grand jury that Diazon had been with her the night before Gurley had been reported missing. Under oath, Linda admitted that she and Diazon had more than a platonic relationship.
So your testimony today is that you went to bed at about 12:30 and you were in bed with him awake, and he was there with you for several hours.
Yes, he was at my home the whole evening.
Okay.
Now, I did not tell Detective Fox that I had sex with him. I didn't tell him that.
She told the grand jurors that she had known that Diazon was moving to South Carolina with another woman, which raised a big question for one of the grand jurors.
As a woman, I find it very difficult to understand you going upstairs and having sex with him, knowing that he was leaving the next day to go to South Carolina to another woman, and not being emotionally upset by that.
Well, yeah, I was. I confronted him with it, but I couldn't say anything. I mean, he had, if he was involved with somebody between the time that Gurley left and everything, well, then he's involved.
Linda told the grand jurors that Diazon had let her know he was in Charleston, but not until the day after her interview with police.
So Diazon called me, and I said, "You've got to call Detective Mike Fox. You've got to call him. You've been on the news."
However, Linda said she had not asked about his ex-wife's whereabouts, either then or at any other point in their relationship. She also insisted that she had never met Gurley, nor had she wanted to.
Why would I be jealous of this lady? I didn't know her.
Linda's 12 hours of testimony didn't result in an indictment of Diazon, nor did it get authorities any closer to discovering what had happened to Gurley Chu Hasenkopf. Detectives decided to try a different approach. They conducted a thorough search of Linda and Diazon's homes. At Linda's house, they found a Japanese ninja sword hidden in the attic. Receipts showed that it had been purchased by Diazon on the day of Gurley's disappearance. Linda told police that Diazon had given her the sword as a gift.
He says, you should take up fencing and you should learn how to sword fight. And I said, well, I've always kind of wanted to do that.
She also said that the sword had been in plain sight the first time officers had been to her house. She claimed she had only hidden it because she was concerned that police would take the only gift that Diazon had given her.
The cops took my house, turned it upside down, stole things from me. Every single thing related to UFOs, ETs, everything. Every single thing. They cleaned me out.
Detectives turned the sword over for forensic testing. They also uncovered evidence that Linda, in fact, on at least one occasion, Gurley had been Linda's teller.
Linda had gone to the bank and introduced herself to Gurley as a customer of the bank.
It was like a 20-second encounter. Had I had time to think about it, I'd say, oh yeah, at the bank. But I didn't. I was being threatened. They screamed at me. They threatened me. I was there for 12 hours with one break.
On October 29th, police swore out an arrest warrant for Linda.
They brought perjury charges against me. You know, I had no idea what it was about.
She had been lying to the grand jury.
Albuquerque authorities now had Linda and Diazin in custody, but they were no closer to solving the mystery of Gurley Chu Hasenkoff's disappearance. By mid-October, she had been missing for over a month.
Gurley had 100% fallen off the face of the earth, and there was not one sign of her still being alive.
But if Gurley was dead, where was her body?
They brought in dogs, they brought in machines that tell where bones and stuff are. They did everything. They brought in psychics.
There were search parties out near where the bloody clothes were found. There were search parties everywhere, and they never found Gurley's body.
Albuquerque police and prosecutors were convinced that Gurley Chu Hasenkoff had been murdered. But the unsuccessful searches meant they would have to rely on a different body of evidence to get a conviction.
This was one of the most expensive cases in the state of New Mexico. The prosecution spent a lot of money.
Forensic tests were conducted on hundreds of pieces of evidence. Tests on the ninja sword were interesting, but ultimately inconclusive.
Investigators determined that there was blood on it, but it's been compromised and they can't lift good DNA off it.
DNA tests on the bloody clothes found by the highway proved that they had belonged to Gurley.
The panties belong to Gurley Chu Hasenkoff. The blouse belongs to Gurley Chu Hasenkoff. The hair came from Gurley Chu Hasenkoff.
There was also saliva on the shoulder of the blouse that did not come from Gurley.
In inspecting Gurley's bloody blouse, we found that Diazin's saliva had been left behind on that blouse.
You had the blood of Gurley Chu Hasenkoff mixed with the saliva of Diazin Hasenkoff. That puts Diazin Hasenkoff at the scene of Gurley's murder.
Tests on the carpet and sofa from Gurley's apartment also revealed 2 sets of DNA. One belonged to Gurley.
Criminalistics detectives were able to find very small blood particles from Gurley Chu Hasenkoff in front of the couch area.
If investigators were expecting the other DNA to be Diazin Hasenkoff's, they were in for a shock. The other DNA belonged to Linda Henning.
When the crime lab advised me that they had come up with Linda Henning's blood on Gurley Hasenkoff's carpet and on Gurley Hasenkoff's couch, we knew for certain she was involved in the murder.
On November 17th, grand jurors heard all the evidence against Diazin Hasenkoff and Linda Henning. The blood and DNA evidence, the bank records that showed Linda had met Gurley, and Diazin's threats against his estranged wife. The grand jury returned an indictment against both for the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Gurley Chu Hasenkoff. Coming up, Linda's trial makes sensational headlines.
There were all kinds of crazy things. Samurai swords, alien queen, reptilian creatures. It was hard to keep it all straight.
And Linda's attorneys gamble on the testimony. On October 1st, 2002, Linda Henning walked into the Bernalillo County Courthouse in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to stand trial for the 1999 murder of her lover's estranged wife, Gurley Chu Hasenkoff. From the beginning, it was a historic case.
Linda was the first woman in New Mexico history since statehood that would have faced the death penalty.
It was also a headline grabber.
I think the media liked the idea of aliens, and I think the media liked the idea of the fact that there was a body that could not be found.
There were all kinds of crazy things. Samurai swords, alien queens, reptilian creatures. It was hard to keep it all straight.
In January of 2002, Daizen Hassenkopf, Linda's boyfriend, had surprised prosecutors by pleading guilty to planning the murder of his wife.
Daizen cut a plea deal where he pled to, I believe, 90.
Refused to even consider a similar deal.
I flat out said I won't take a plea bargain.
I started talking to her about what the police believed, and she said, "That's silly." Told me that she had nothing to do with it.
Before prosecutors could get a jury to convict Linda, they needed to prove that Gurley had been murdered. While Daizen had pleaded guilty to murder as part of his plea, he claimed he had hired a hitman and didn't know where Gurley's body was buried. That could leave a big question mark in the minds of jurors.
We don't know what happened to her. She could be buried somewhere, she could be cut up in pieces somewhere, or she could be alive and well somewhere in Asia.
The DA began by outlining the evidence prosecutors had assembled against Linda.
Prosecutors relied a lot on forensic evidence. They relied a lot on the bloodstains that were found in Gurley's apartment.
And the prosecution's alleged motive?
There's no way I benefit. There's no way to tie it in. So they have to say, well, let's see, what's weird about Linda Henning? She's into UFOs. Well, we'll blame it all on that. And so they came up with this idea that it was a battle between space alien queens, that Gurley and I had this long, drawn-out battle at her apartment, you know.
According to Linda, the prosecution's theory didn't hold up to scrutiny.
I battled her, and this was battled her to death. Then I would have had to come back to my own home. Somewhere I am going to leave a trace. It's going to be DNA, it's going to be something. There was nothing in my car, nothing in my apartment, nothing on my clothes, nothing in my garage. There was nothing.
However, in their open, her defense attorneys conceded that some of the blood found in Gurley's apartment belonged to Linda. But they told the jury that there was an explanation that proved Linda was not a killer. She was a victim.
Our position was that Daizen Hassenkopf collected blood from Linda when she was incapacitated and actually planted the blood in Gurley's apartment in order to frame Linda.
Mr. Hassenkopf claimed that he had some of her blood as part of some research that he was doing.
And the jury would get to hear Daizen's claims for themselves.
The whole case hinged on this impossible scenario. Will the trial jury believe that Daizen Hassenkopf placed the blood?
The defense team's job was made more difficult because their client disagreed with the defense strategy.
What made it difficult was her unwavering love for Daizen. She never even accepted the fact that he pled guilty to her murder, and she just thought that he was copping out.
Daizen's statement is fabricated. There was no truth to it whatsoever.
Instead, Linda tried to convince her attorney to attack the forensic evidence head-on.
There's no integrity in the evidence. The custody tags show that the forensic detective processed the crime scene and he never turned him in to the lab to test until after the indictment came in.
According to Linda, her defense was handicapped because her attorney had never filed a motion to allow a defense expert to examine the forensic evidence.
He prepares the motion to challenge the state, asking the state to produce blood evidence from the crime scene, then he never files it.
The prosecution began by presenting evidence to back up their theory about how the crime was committed. First, there were the records showing that Linda had come into contact with Gurley at the bank.
During that course of Linda going into the bank, she became friendly with Gurley.
It's possible that this familiar face, a woman, doesn't seem to be a threat, shows up on Gurley's front doorstep, and the door is open.
Police do not believe that Gurley would have let Daizen in or any other stranger.
And once Linda was inside, prosecutors called forensic experts who testified about the blood found in the apartment.
But with Linda Henning, you actually have DNA evidence. You have her blood found in the victim's apartment.
They believe there was that altercation there and that Gurley was taken forcibly, probably alive, from her apartment to some undisclosed place.
Then, the bloody tarp and clothes found by the desert highway came into evidence.
Gurley was taken out, possibly in a tarp or a body bag, thrown into a trunk, and driven to the area of Magdalena, New Mexico, where she was tortured, most likely by the use of the ninja sword and other items, and ultimately killed.
On October 15th, the defense began their case with their star witness, Diazin Hassenkoft.
He did acknowledge under testimony that he did plant Linda Henning's blood. It was to frame somebody else and not him.
Since Linda's defense had already painted Diazin as a con man and manipulator, putting him on the stand was a high-risk strategy. And with the death penalty still a possibility for Linda, the stakes couldn't have been higher.
You know what? It really doesn't make any difference to me. I don't care whether or not you kill this woman. You want to put the needle in her arm, go ahead. The only thing that's going to happen here is that you're going to kill my next victim.
He acted like a maniac. He acted like an idiot.
He sent me a note before he testified, and he said, "Please forgive me for everything I'm going to say, but your attorney has asked me to put on a grand performance."
Linda believed that Diazin had put on the grand performance in an effort to save her life. But while she believed his intentions were good, she was less sure about her attorney's intentions. Not only had they introduced their star witness as a liar and a con man, Diazin's testimony made it practically impossible for her to testify in her own defense.
There's no way I can testify. I'm going to say my lawyer is a liar, no good SOB. This whole thing is a hoax. I mean, they put me in a no-win situation.
When the case went to the jury on October 18th, Linda did not like her chances for acquittal.
I knew I was going to be convicted. I had no defense.
But her attorneys were more confident.
There was no direct evidence that indicated that she murdered. It was all circumstantial evidence.
Coming up, the verdict, and Linda gets her chance to speak to the court.
He alleges I'm a cannibal, an alien queen, and a ninja assassin warrior. Well, will he file a...
On October 25, 2002, a Bernalillo County, New Mexico jury returned to the courtroom where 49-year-old Linda Henning awaited her fate. She was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping and was facing the possibility of the death penalty if found guilty.
Find the defendant Linda Henning guilty of first-degree murder, felony murder, as charged in the alternative to count one.
The state, the prosecutors, they were going to crush this bitch who felt that she was going to, stand up and demand her legal rights. Well, we're going to make an example of you, bitches like you. And that's exactly the way they think. They were going to make an example of this bitch.
But the jury decided to spare her life.
They decided not to give her the death penalty.
On April 18, 2003, 49-year-old Linda Henning was back in the Bernalillo County Courthouse for sentencing. To ensure she served the maximum time, prosecutors added a gruesome new detail to their theory of how Diazin and Linda had disposed of Gurley Chu Hassenkoff's body.
I was set up by the prosecution as, hit woman, ninja assassin warrior, mind-controlled robot, mastermind criminal, and cannibal. When they ran out, well, if I was a cannibal, why don't you bring it up in the trial? Why don't you bring it up in the trial? Well, they don't bring it up because there's no evidence.
The judge sentenced Linda to a minimum of 73 years in prison. Even as she was being taken to begin what was essentially a life sentence, Linda continued to insist she was the victim of faulty forensics.
This issue is about the chain of custody. 220 items of evidence were taken. Only 9 were done properly.
Linda continues to maintain her innocence and her faith in Diazin Hassenkoff.
I love the kindness about him. I love the compassion. I love his brilliance. I hope that Gurley Chu is found. I hope that a lot of this is really going to turn out to be a hoax.
Doing drugs.
A hands-off mother.
Shayna kind of had free reign from her mother.
And a strict stepfather.
He wanted her to have a curfew, to have to come home, to have to go to school.
It was a recipe for tragedy.
I can't tell if he's been shot in the face or somebody hit him with something.
And the investigation would send authorities scrambling to answer two questions. Had a rebellious teen gone too far?
I heard her say, yeah, I did it for my mom.
Or was she acting under parental supervision? Phone rang at Francis and David Bone's house. The caller was their son James's wife, Marseille Kelly. And she needed a favor. James wasn't answering his phone.
Marseille called wanting someone to go wake him up because she couldn't get him awake.
Marseille was wrapping up her night shift at Lufkin Memorial Hospital. And her truck driver husband, Marseille explained, needed to get an early start on some repairs to his rig.
He wanted me to call him at 7 and wake him up so he could finish what he was doing to the trucks.
David Bone went next door to wake up James.
His home was only about 75 or 100 yards away.
But James didn't answer the older man's knock.
He called Marseille and told her James didn't wake up. And she said, no, he's got to get up. You've got to get him up.
So David returned next door. Only this time, he didn't just knock, he went inside.
That's when he found James lying in bed.
James was eerily still, with a quilt pulled up over his head.
He kept calling James and couldn't wake James up.
Took his walking stick and poked him on the foot, and he didn't move or anything. So he pulled the quilt back.
And that's when David Bone discovered why he couldn't wake James Kelly.
911.
This is David Bone.
Okay.
Hey, please ask my stepson.
What's going on?
I think he's dead in the bed.
Marseille was only 21 when she met James Kelly. But she'd already been married, divorced, and a mother.
I got married the first time at 17. When I met James, I had 2 children, Shayna and Caitlin.
She also had a bit of a reputation, a holdover from her years as a rebellious teen.
I quit school in the 9th grade, dabble into marijuana a little bit.
She got into, different trouble hanging around with, different people, that she shouldn't have been hanging around with.
In fact, that's how she met James in 1992.
James and Marseille met, I guess you'd call it, with the crowds that run around. They do a lot of street racing during that time, and that's actually how they met.
2 years younger than Marseille, James was a classic good old boy.
All he wanted to do was go out and have a good time, and it consisted of something that went fast or made lots of noise.
And Marseille seemed like the perfect girl for him.
He loved the fact that she liked to play. And the four-wheel drive trucks, they had a lot in common on that.
James and Marseille Released from prison, James had saved enough money to buy a truck and went into business for himself.
He had really seemed to straighten his life out. He was a hard-working individual.
And before long, James and Marseille were dating again and trying to build a better life together. Marseille and her daughters moved in with James and his sons, living next door to his mother.
I have 8 acres, and my mother-in-law had a house. I had a trailer. James had a double wide.
And in 2003, more than a decade after their first date, the couple married.
She wanted to go just in front of the Justice of the Peace. And James told her no, he would get married in a church. And they did. They got married in a church. And he was happy. He really was. At that day, you would have thought he owned the world.
James didn't own the world, but he did own 2 more trucks. By the wedding, what had started as a one-man operation had grown into a small firm.
If you have 3 trucks and you're working every day, you can make pretty good money.
Marseille was making good money too, investing some of her hospital salary in a side business.
I had bought some bounce houses and started a part-time rental business that I would do on the weekends. And I continued also to do my work as a therapist and the paperwork for the trucking company. So, I mean, we both stayed really busy.
But the money they earned did offer ample opportunity to enjoy their time together.
We like to go to a place called Shiloh Ridge. It was a 4x4 mud park.
They would go down there and play in the mud, and from the time he's a little bitty, he loved to play in mud. If there was a mud puddle, he's gonna step in.
But James and Marseille also had another hobby, fighting.
You know, James always thought he was right, and Marseille always thought she was right. Somebody's got to be wrong. Can't be 2 rights. And, you know, they bickered and argued.
There were some times when me and James were arguing or fighting, or mostly we'd been drinking.
But after every argument, Marseille and James found a way to make up.
He loved her, and he was just kind of there to do whatever she wanted to do. She wanted a car. He bought her a '68 Camaro. She wanted a 4-wheeler. He bought a 4-wheeler.
By 2005, the blue-collar couple was moving into the middle class. But their material possessions masked tensions threatening to tear the family apart. October 5th, 2005, Marseille found herself in the middle of another argument. This time, it wasn't with her husband, but with her 16-year-old daughter, Shayna.
I had asked her to clean her room, and she got mad, and we ended up getting in an actual fight, like fist fight.
Sheriff's Department got called out because Shayna and Marseille got into it pretty bad.
In fact, they were still at it when the deputies arrived.
She had pushed me into the glass screen door, and I had a spot on my head that was bleeding.
Shayna was arrested on that, and as a result was placed on juvenile probation.
Shayna's arrest was the culmination of a battle that had been brewing since Marseille's marriage to James when Shayna was just 13.
No stepfather is going to come on the scene at that kind of age and be able to take over a successful parenting role even under the best circumstances.
Shayna's circumstances were far from best. Not only had she been struggling with the trauma of her grandmother and sister's untimely deaths, she'd inherited all her mother's teenage rebelliousness.
Shayna was pretty wild, running the roads, drinking, doing drugs.
She was a troubled child. She had been spinning out of control for a while.
Not that her mother had tried to control her.
Marseille really allowed Shayna a lot of privileges that most children would not be accustomed to and probably should not be allowed.
I felt like if I gave them what they wanted or let them do what they wanted, it was kind of to make up for me not being there.
Shayna had begun skipping school on a regular basis. And much like her mother before her, she'd fallen in with a tough crowd.
Shayna was hanging out with people who had been involved in the juvenile system as well as the adult criminal justice system.
It was a world her stepfather knew well, a world he'd been determined to keep his stepdaughter away from.
James was always trying to correct Shayna, more or less be a father figure to her. She didn't want that. And she would tell him, "You're not my father."
The friction between James and Shayna had led to arguments between James and Marseille.
We had different ways of raising the kids. That was most of our arguments and fights.
Anytime I would be around, it was a problem. It's like he developed an attitude anytime I came around, and you could feel when somebody doesn't want you around.
So Shayna made an effort not to be around at all.
I felt like that I was the cause of their problems. So when I got old enough and I got a boyfriend, I moved out. It seems like their relationship was better when I was gone.
She did move out with her boyfriend. She was almost 15, but she was still 14.
Marseille had done little, if anything, to stop her.
For Marseille to have allowed her 14-year-old daughter at that time to move out of the residence and go live with a boyfriend just kind of shows that it was a relationship that she and her mother shared that would not be typical.
A few weeks later, Shayna was back home. And by 2005, James's tougher parenting approach appeared to be rubbing off on Marseille. When Shayna moved out again at 16, Marseille had taken action.
So I went and got her things and made her move home.
Within days, mother and daughter had come to blows. If James and Marseille hoped the arrest would turn Shayna around, they were sadly mistaken. If anything, she became wilder, taking up with a new 23-year-old boyfriend named Dallas Christian.
Dallas Christian was a registered sex offender, not somebody that ideally one would think you would want your daughter associating with.
Marseille apparently didn't object, but James Kelly certainly did, though arguing with Marseille did no good.
I think he was to the point to where he was tired of all the arguing and everything.
By October, with James's patience wearing thin, the fights with stepdaughter Shayna took on a new, threatening tone.
She'd tell him, "I'm gonna kill you one of these days."
Saturday, October 22, 2005 was technically a day off for James Kelly. But there was little downtime for a small businessman with a fleet of hard-working trucks.
He was doing some maintenance repairs on them, brakes and oil changes and stuff.
By 6, when Marseille was starting her overnight shift at Lufkin Memorial, James was already up to his elbows in engine oil, and he would stay at it for hours.
I talked to James a couple of times early in the night. He was still working on his truck.
At least he could work in peace. Shayna had disappeared with her new boyfriend, Dallas Christian, and a younger boy by the name of Colton Weir.
Shayna, Colton, Dallas were out riding, partying, drinking.
Finally, at a little past 3 a.m., James Kelly could do no more.
He was ready to take a shower and get ready for bed.
But as exhausted as James was, the work wasn't finished.
He called his wife Marseille at the hospital asking for a wake-up call, that he needed to wake up early on Sunday and get back to work.
That wasn't anything unusual when he stayed up late.
His wake-up call arranged, James had laid down for a few hours sleep.
James went to bed around 3:30 in the morning, and he expected to be awakened about 4 hours later.
But James would not be answering his wake-up call.
She started trying to call him, and he didn't answer the phone. But he didn't answer because he was dead. That's the reason.
Coming up, Marseille receives the awful news.
Okay, hang tight, stop. Stop, take a breath.
And the investigators wonder, was Sunday, October 23, 2005. It was about 8 a.m. when Marseille Kelly's father-in-law, David Bone, dialed 911 and reached the Nacogdoches County Sheriff's Department.
The call reported that something was wrong with James Kelly.
Phone.
I couldn't get him up, so I called and I asked his stepfather if he would go and wake him up.
But James Kelly couldn't wake up.
When Mr. Bone went inside the bedroom, he pulled the covers back from James's head and immediately saw that James was dead.
With sheriff's deputies on the way, David Bone called his daughter-in-law back.
My husband called Marseille Dave and told her that she needed to come home, that something bad had happened.
He said he's got some blood on his mouth. He said I called the ambulance. I said, okay, I'm leaving work.
Although she was apparently too shaken by the news to drive.
I called James's best friend and I told him something was wrong with James and I wanted to know if he'd drive me out there.
I jump in the car and we're making a mad dash for James and Marseille's house.
While Marseille and Kevin Dill sped toward the Kellys' house, deputies were arriving on the scene. They found James's mother, stepfather, and a growing number of neighbors gathered in the yard.
It doesn't take word long to spread in a small community, so other people that knew the Kelly family also began arriving.
They had little information to offer the investigators, however.
Everyone present was upset. They knew that something tragic and terrible had happened to James. They weren't exactly sure at that point what had happened.
When the deputies went inside, they found James exactly as David Bone had described in his 911 call.
It was dark. He was laying in the bed, had the covers up to him.
In his call, David Bone had been unsure whether his stepson had been beaten or shot. For law enforcement officers, there was no mistaking the grisly wound that had left James Kelly covered in blood.
Kelly had been shot in the face.
We had a homicide on our hands.
Was it an intruder? To police, nothing seemed out of the ordinary.
It did not appear that anything else had really been disturbed.
But lying on the floor near James's bed, the deputies did find one puzzling clue.
There was a telephone, a cellular phone, laying in the bedroom on the floor that was still open, still in a call-type state.
Had James been shot in his sleep, or had he been trying to make a call when the killer struck? While the officers pondered the mystery, Marseille and James's friend...
90 miles an hour. We get pulled over by the law. Of course, we're going too fast.
The car had barely stopped before Marseille leaped out to try and explain the situation.
Okay, hang tight, stop. Stop and take a breath.
When you look at the video, you see that Marseille is very distraught.
What's the deal?
I don't know. My father-in-law found my husband and the cops just got there. They said he's dead.
Marseille was in such obvious distress that the officer let them go with a warning.
I'm sorry for your loss. Don't slow down, sir.
By the time she'd reached home a few minutes later, however, it appeared that Marseille had pulled herself together.
When we pulled up in the yard, she calmly got out of the car, walked over there, talked to an officer for a second.
Marseille walked up on the porch, and Bill Ball was coming out the door. And she looked at him and said, "Is he dead?" And Bill said, "Yes."
Confirmation of the horrible news seemed to send Marseille into shock.
She just turned, walked in the house, got the dog food, went and fed the dogs.
She was flat. She had no emotions, no nothing.
So I asked, could I feed the dogs? Because I wanted in the house. I just wanted in, to see.
The officers at the scene did have some questions for her, however. While the coroner's personnel removed James's body from the bedroom, Marseille sat in the living room and gave the investigators a brief statement.
We asked her some questions about the last time she had spoken to James.
Marseille told the deputies she'd last talked to James while at work at around 3:30 a.m. when he'd requested the wake-up call.
And then they asked me, do you know anybody that wanted him dead? I said no. They asked, did he have any enemies? I said, well, there's people that don't like him, but I wouldn't say enough to kill him.
That's what Marseille said in the living room. But out in the yard, deputies were getting a different story from family members.
Shayna's name came up several times.
The family, as well as law enforcement, was familiar with the troubled relationship that Shayna had with James.
Not only had Shayna frequently sparred with her stepfather, several of the young men she ran with had police records.
Dallas Christian's name, Colton Weir's name, they all emerged very early on. And we in law enforcement here were familiar with some of those names from some prior dealings as well.
And as the deputies at the scene couldn't help but notice, Shayna and her friends were conspicuously absent from the growing crowd in the yard.
We wanted to talk to Shayna, so we began to ask Marseille and family members where we could find her at. Marseille played a part in helping us track them down by calling them.
Shayna and Dallas Christian came in together that evening. Questioned by the investigators, Shayna said she'd last seen James Kelly at around 9 p.m. the night before.
I went home last night about 9 o'clock and got my clothes. I sat down with my dad and we talked for a little while, and I asked him, can I go stay at a friend's house because I'm on probation? And he said yes.
For once, according to what she told the detectives, there had been little drama between Shayna and her stepfather.
Nobody argued, we didn't fight, we just talked.
Asked what she'd done Saturday night, Shayna said she and the boys had spent most of the evening driving around the back roads and partying down by the river.
They were out at the Shawnee River bottom drinking that night.
It's not uncommon for teenagers to gather up down there, build bonfires, and have a party. And apparently that's what they had done on this particular occasion.
In the next interrogation room, deputies got a similar story from Dallas Christian and from 15-year-old Colton Weir when he was questioned the next day.
We went down to Shawnee and chilled out down there and watched the fire, shot a couple of guns off.
All three stories more or less matched, but not completely.
Details and inconsistencies in their stories began to emerge, and we could then question them more specifically.
And the investigators knew exactly where to apply the pressure. The youngest member of the trio, 15-year-old Colton Weir.
Colton, I believe you're a smart enough kid to know what you're in here for. And I believe that you need to get it off your chest. I believe it's eating you alive, and you need to talk to me about it.
Coming up, deputies press Colton Weir for a confession.
Did you shoot James Kelly?
And his answer takes the investigators in a startling new direction. On the evening of October 23, 2005, James Kelly had been dead less than 24 hours. But the Nacogdoches County Sheriff's Department already had several strong suspects in his murder. Kelly's stepdaughter, Shayna Sepulvedo, her boyfriend, Dallas Christian, and their friend, Colton Weir.
These kids had been into some trouble. We had dealt with them.
16-year-old Shayna also had a history of fighting with her stepfather, something her mother, James's wife, Marseille, hadn't mentioned to the investigators.
I had my suspicions, but no, I didn't say anything because, first of all, I hadn't talked.
Questioned that evening, Shayna and her boyfriend had both denied killing James Kelly. But when the investigators spoke to 15-year-old Colton Weir, the young man who'd been riding around with Shayna and Dallas that Saturday night, it was quickly apparent that the teenager knew something.
I can look in your face and I can tell that you need to get it off your chest. I mean, it's eating you alive. I can see it in your face.
By the time we were able to more or less confront him, Colton had had a little bit of time to reflect on the gravity of what he had done.
Investigators were quick to capitalize on Colton's guilty conscience.
Did you shoot James Kelly?
On the verge of tears, the teenager could only nod.
Colton Weir confessed to them that he had been the person that pulled the trigger.
After you shot, what did you do?
Ran as fast as I could because I was scared.
Then the teen went on to reveal what he said were the full details of James Kelly's death.
The kids had gone out partying. They were all together. They had already discussed and planned the fact that this murder was going to occur, and they were just kind of looking for the right opportunity.
According to Colton, the opportunity had come early on the morning of October 23rd. That's when Colton claimed that he, Shayna, and Dallas had driven out to the house where James Kelly slept.
Shayna and Colton got out of the car, got a gun and some gloves out of the trunk of the car. They went to the house where Shayna let Colton in the house, showed Colton where James's room was.
Shayna comes back. I think she gets sick to her stomach. She comes back, gets in the car.
Meanwhile, Colton had snuck into the bedroom.
Where was James at when you went in the house?
In his bed.
He gets right up in front of James Kelly, who is asleep, and he pulls the trigger.
Then, according to Colton, the trio had gone back down to the riverbank.
They threw the gun into the river and they burned a few items, some gloves, a sweater that somebody had been wearing.
A confession, a list of accomplices, the location of the murder weapon. By the time Colton finished, only one question remained. Why would he go along with the plot?
She offered him remuneration, like she referred to it as a ride, meaning a vehicle of some kind.
Only according to Colton, it wasn't Shayna who'd offered.
By who?
By Marcy.
It was a stunning statement. But was it true? Was Marcy behind her husband's murder? When the investigators confronted Shayna with the news of Colton's confession, she denied everything.
Shayna didn't say anything that helped the investigators.
Dallas Christian, on the other hand.
If you had to say, here's who came up with the idea and the plan, who's most responsible?
Shayna and Marcy.
Shayna and Marcy, both.
Yes, sir.
Marcy Kelly's name continued to emerge by the other co-defendants in the case as having been involved in the planning and the encouraging of this act, even to the point of offering them money and vehicles and things of that nature if they would carry the act out.
Dallas even told the officers how after the shooting, Shayna had called her mother and told her James was dead.
The job's done. That's what Shayna said to her mom. The job's done.
By Tuesday evening, 2 days after James's murder, Colton, Shayna, and Dallas were all in custody. But a warrant for Marcy's arrest would have to wait. The investigators needed evidence to confirm that Marcy was the mastermind behind her husband's murder.
We had to establish a more affirmative link than just their word.
So when Marcy turned up at the sheriff's department on Tuesday, it was merely to provide moral support to her daughter. And as the teenager was booked on murder charges, she finally broke down.
In the office with one of the deputies, I heard her saying, yeah, I did it for my mom. I didn't want him making her cry anymore.
Shayna may have stopped all the fighting in the Kelly household, but did she act alone? Or was her mother involved? That was the question sheriff's deputies had to answer.
We needed to look at her, or continued to look at her, as a potential suspect.
But to the rest of the world, Marcy was a grieving widow, busy with arrangements for her husband's funeral. Meanwhile, the investigators were equally busy looking for evidence to confirm Dallas and Colton's statements. They searched the place where Colton claimed they tossed the murder weapon.
We did recover the rifle out of the river, and also the scene where they burnt the sweater and the gloves. There were still remnants there from where they did that.
We were very pleased to have that physical evidence.
But while the gun appeared to confirm Colton's account of the shooting, it didn't necessarily incriminate Marcy. There was something that could, however. In his interrogation, Dallas Christian claimed that Shayna had called her mother and informed her that the job was done.
Cellular phone records played a very vital part in us being able to link Marcy.
When the investigators subpoenaed Marcy and Shayna's phone records, they revealed a series of calls between mother and daughter over the course of the night.
Marcy's phone calls to Shayna before James was shot and after James was shot very much put her in the role of at least being a participant.
The phone records also confirmed that Marcy and James had spoken several times over the course of the evening. But instead of arranging a wake-up call, authorities were beginning to suspect that James Kelly had unwittingly signed his death warrant.
Those phone calls were her attempts to try and determine about what time James was planning on going to bed, and that it was okay to go up there and carry this act out.
And then there was the mysterious matter of the open cell phone deputies had found lying by the bed.
The last calls made from that phone had been to Marcy Kelly.
The fact that the phone was found open and that the last call had been made well after James supposedly turned in raised an intriguing possibility.
We really believe that Marseille had staged this to be able to hear the gunshot as this act actually took place.
On the afternoon of Wednesday, October 26th, Marseille Kelly met with her late husband's family at a local funeral home.
We had a private viewing where we could open the casket.
Midway through the viewing, Marseille got a phone call.
It was the deputy. He said, come down here, something anyway. They had a few more questions for me.
Marseille arrived at the station annoyed. James's funeral was just hours away.
I asked them if we're going to be done in time for me to make it to the services that night.
The answer was no.
He said, this may come as a shock to you, but we have a warrant for your arrest. And now I asked him for what, and he says murder.
The deputy was right. The news did appear to shock Marseille.
She acted dumb, like she didn't know what we were talking about, and just can't believe this.
I said, you know, why? And he says that I hired Colton. I thought it was just a mistake because I knew I'd never talked to Colton. I've never asked Colton to kill my husband.
August 1st, 2006. It was less than a year since Marseille Kelly's husband James had been found dead, shot to death in his sleep. Marseille's 17-year-old daughter Shayna had immediately been suspected of the crime.
Shayna's name certainly came up early on. Shayna was on juvenile probation at that particular time for assaulting Marseille.
But once Shayna, her boyfriend Dallas Christian, and friend Colton Weir were in custody, things had only gotten more intriguing.
The case took a huge turn from being a case of an upset stepdaughter and her friends killing a man to his own wife being implicated in a murder for hire scheme.
They began to immediately explain to us that Marseille had actually offered them payment for having her husband killed.
And when Marseille walked into an East Texas courtroom that morning to stand trial for her husband's murder, she faced the possibility of life in prison.
After a great deal of talk with James's family, I just didn't believe a jury would send.
Money. Not only would Marseille get the assets of James's trucking business, there was also his life insurance, money that Marseille was very keen on collecting, according to the prosecutors.
The funeral home director did actually contact us and advise us that they thought it was a little strange that she had asked about collecting on those payments.
And prosecutors claimed Marseille had earmarked a portion of that money to pay Colton Weir for the hit.
Marseille, through Shayna, had promised him a truck in exchange, a truck and I believe some money in exchange for doing this.
There was also mention of a jet ski, stuff that he never had, probably didn't think he'd ever would have. So he fell for it.
In its open, the defense didn't deny that Marseille had talked about killing James. But in their version, it wasn't part of any elaborate plot.
I did a few times say that I wanted James dead, but people say that every day. I mean, everybody says that sometimes when they're, God, I just want to kill you, but not in the same context as it was made out to be.
Marseille tries to minimize her involvement by saying, oh, I thought everybody knew I didn't really mean it.
Was it solicitation? Or was Marseille simply venting? When the prosecution started presenting its case that afternoon, they argued that Marseille had done far more than occasionally wish James dead.
It wasn't something that happened, one night at a party she had too much to drink. It happened at different times, at different locations.
And prosecutors had a pair of witnesses to back up the claim. And they weren't Dallas Christian and Colton Weir, the two young men who'd already implicated Marseille.
She had discussed killing James with not just Colton Weir, but with a few people.
We were actually able to establish two different individuals that Marseille had approached in the past and offered the payment of money or vehicles to have her husband killed.
On August 3rd, the prosecution rested, certain they'd prove that Marseille was behind James's murder.
you don't go out and initiate contact with 3, 4, however many different young men, promising them something to kill your husband unless you're serious about it.
When the defense started presenting its case that same afternoon, they maintained that Marseille never intended to have James killed. Instead, they claimed that Shayna, Colton, and Dallas had acted on their own.
Her own daughter and 2 other teenagers, she threw all 3 of them under the bus.
Well, I think they were just talking about things that were going on, and it just happened. I don't think they went out that night planning to do that. I mean, I really don't believe that.
Marseille stopped short of taking the stand and accusing her own daughter of murder, however. In fact, she didn't testify at all. Instead, it was her 17-year-old daughter who took the stand on August 4th.
Shayna elected to testify on her mother's behalf at Marseille's trial.
When she came in and she still had her cuffs on, it was heartbreaking. I mean, I hated seeing her like that.
Despite the fact that her own murder trial was still pending, Shayna made an emotional confession on the stand.
We left the house, and after I heard the gunshot, nobody said nothing in the car. I had went back to the car. Nobody had said nothing. And then just out of the blue, Colton says that he killed him. He goes, "I killed a man." Well, I freaked out and I started screaming because I couldn't believe that that anything happened like that.
According to Shayna, there was no plan and no possibility that her mother could have been involved.
My mom was at work and stuff. I mean, she didn't have nothing to do with this. And the DA was steady saying, she paid this kid, she paid this kid. She didn't. I made all fingers point to me and my friends. Mainly all fingers point to me.
Shayna kind of threw herself under the bus there for her mother and said, "I'll take the blame for all of this." You know, Marseille didn't do it for her. She certainly wasn't trying to save Shayna from any sort of blame or keep from implicating Shayna in anything.
If what Shayna said was true, her tearful testimony absolved Marseille of all guilt, at least the criminal kind.
The only way I blame myself is I put her in that environment.
Coming up, will the jury decide Marseille is a murderer or merely a bad mother?
She wanted her mother's approval. She wanted...
August 4th, 2006. It took the jury just 2 hours to reach a verdict in the murder trial of Marseille Kelly. The 35-year-old was accused of conspiring with her daughter Shayna, Shayna's boyfriend Dallas Christian, and another young man named Colton Weir to kill her husband James. If convicted, she faced life in prison.
Once somebody's convicted of capital murder, the sentence is automatic.
But that was only if convicted. Just hours before the jury returned to consider a verdict, Marseille's daughter Shayna had made a stunning confession. On the witness stand, the teenager had taken full responsibility for her stepfather's death.
I felt like my mom didn't love me because of her husband. And I felt like I had to fight for that love.
She wanted her mother's approval. She wanted it so much that she was willing to kill James Kelly. And then even after killing him, she was willing to put herself out there to save her mom.
When Shayna testified at my trial, it was really heartbreaking to see her up there defending me.
But would Shayna's courtroom confession sway the jury? The answer was no. The jury found Marseille guilty of murder.
Used her child. She used her child's friends and other people to get what she wanted. She's ruined more than just her husband's life. She's ruined the lives of everybody's family that was involved in this thing.
Shayna disagrees. Convicted of murder in 2007 and also serving life in a prison just a few miles away from Marseille, she continues to stand by her mother.
I don't think my mom should be in prison. There's no reason for her to be here.
Marseille, now serving life without parole, maintains she did not murder James, but she does accept some share of the responsibility.
25%. And that's because I had, we were all there. As far as the actual murder itself, I don't feel responsible for it. Well, I just hope that one day this will be straightened out. There was no capital murder. There was a murder, but there was no capital murder.